the room was packed, and I don't know if it was because of the people or.
That was it.
I think it was the temperature, and I think it was people. Yeah. So I'll take that over this.
Not sure if old K-State can be KCD.
You know what?
Yeah, we got tickets to that be K-State KU down there. And that's always fun in that spread of rain with the half the crowd is K-State.
What was the tournament? The tournament 4 days ago, like last week.
That was the MIW.
As far as I know, sometimes you guys will wait a bit about it.
And that was when they lost to Elms like by 2 or 3.
They lost the championship by 3 points. And you know, Fort Hagen ranked like the tournament nation before Beth got hurt. We had a senior point.
That's what I heard. I didn't know if she played it. So she was out. Is she out the rest of the year?
It sounds like. I don't know if they go even us to the next tournament. She might be. That was really out of shape. I would assume. Yeah.
That's going to hurt. Yeah.
So we got a sophomore bringing down the ball. We lost a lot of leaders. Yeah. So boys lost. Whatever.
Yeah.
You lose that, you lose that.
Makes a difference.
Good.
How are you?
Here's the login. Under the RX.
That's the seat.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
Good and bad, you know. Well, not you, but no. You're the support system.
Light. I don't get it very, very vital. Yeah, sounds good.
Go ahead and call to order the USD 489 Board of Education Board Meeting for Monday, March 9th, 2015. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Patterson, second by Board Member Lang. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. Up next, we have audience participation. This is the first and only opportunity to approach the board with any questions or concerns. And so if there's anybody out in the audience that would like to come forward, now would be the time to do so. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to school spotlights. And Superintendent Cat, I'll let you lead us in that.
Okay, the first thing I want to mention is the Heartland Community Foundation sponsoring a match event tomorrow. Any donation received that day that is earmarked for the USD 489 Foundation of Excellence will receive a match. Donations can be given to the foundation, to a foundation board member, or drop by the Hayes Chamber of Commerce from 9 to 4 tomorrow. Some of the projects that the foundation does are they're seeking funding for the middle school food pantry, as well as continuing to fund after-school programs. A few other things that they have just recently done are paying for the Wilson second graders to attend the Sternberg Museum. They purchased novels for the second graders at Wilson that'll be used every year. They're also paying some of the fees for woodworking at the high school for students. And like I mentioned, after-school care scholarships and some of those things. So doing an awful lot, and we appreciate that. And I encourage anyone that's interested to make their donation tomorrow, earmarked for the 489 Foundation, and that'll be matching dollars. So some good things there. The next item then is the last month we've had the kids over practicing for the play. They're putting on the production of Harvey. That starts Thursday the 12th at 7 p.m. And it'll also run the 13th and 14th. Tickets can be purchased at the door for $6 for adults, $4 for students. Washington, we had visited a little bit about this. Washington Elementary had muffins for moms not too long ago, and I know Board Member Bickle attended that. There was over 280 people that attended that event. Messiah Lutheran Church purchased the juice and muffins for that event, and we really appreciate their help. They also do donuts for dads, which gives the dads an opportunity to go down and eat breakfast with the students as well. This last week we had, or 2 weeks ago now, we had the state wrestling tournament. I want to officially congratulate Ethan Dieterding for second place at the state tournament. He had an outstanding year. He ended up with a record of 38-4 his senior year. And we also had other students that qualified at the regional that we hosted. They were Austin Dale, Tathan Burkhart, and Braden Delzite. And congratulations to those as well that represented us really well there. That is my report for the school spotlight.
All right, thank you, Dean. And then up next, we do have report of committees. Dean, do you want to walk us through that?
I have no reports from committees, but we do have communications from other organizations, and that is the Early Childhood Connections Director's Report is attached, along with the ECC Early Childhood Connections meeting minutes from the 26th of January, and then the Hayes Rec Commission meeting minutes from February 2015 are also attached.
Very good. Do you want to move right into report?
My report?
Yeah.
I will. We had kindergarten roundup the other day. It was something new we tried. We met at the high school. It was very well attended. I thought it went well. There's things that we will change. It was the first time, gathered some good input from the parents there, but I thought it went well. We have, the last numbers I saw, 247 kindergartners that were rounded up. Those are new students. I don't know. I think that'll be, Tom is the guru of the numbers, and I think those are probably still where we are. And the deadline to turn in information is this coming Friday. After that, we will look and see where we are, whether we need to have add a section or not. We're not to that point right now to where we would have to add an extra section. I think the number we thought was about 253 to keep us at that 23 or less. So there's movement, or there's spaces available in some schools, and we just need to, after the 13th, that's the deadline, and then we'll be contacting parents, and these guys did a great job at the communicating, and I thought it went well, and we'll probably continue that.
Do we know how that compares to last year's number?
Last year, we had, well, as of now, we have 268 kindergartners, or it would be next year's first graders, this year's kindergartners, in that ballpark. And if you, the last time we had talked about the KASB projections, what's the number we had on that? 260?
Audited this year for kindergarten was 269.
So, and then the estimate for next year's kindergarten based on the enrollment projections is 276. So Last year it was 280, so we're not quite meeting those expectations, but in the ballpark, so.
Are there usually more that come in by
A
August?
few, but really, I think what we had that conversation, and the numbers pretty much stay pretty steady. We'll have kids come in and out of the district, but that's probably pretty close to where we'll be. Obviously, we won't know till August, and then we'll have to make a decision in August on how we, if we have enough numbers, then we could add a class. We will have space, it's just a matter of numbers, so. The teachers, I had reported, we were trying to extend the student day to get some collaboration time, and that vote has not taken place yet. It should be this week then. There was some confusion on ballots and whatnot, so we should have that information coming soon. And then the Washington update, I believe as of today, all of the teachers are placed. Right, yeah, all of the teachers are placed as of today. Students, I think Alan's still working with some families that had priorities and they're on waiting lists and things, but typically they're all placed, and I don't think we had very many that ended up with out their first or second choice. There's a few, and but overall I think that's going real well. We meet this Friday on the moving schedule or the transition into that. Rusty, do you want to come up and maybe talk a little bit about the construction side of this? And he's getting started setting up some of this, and I know we'll have to do more, but I guess give us an update on what you have.
Met with the city and also with the fire department on the egress, and basically worked with them. I've given some stuff to HTK to go ahead and finish up the code footprint so we can get it to the State Farm Marshal's office. First thing that I wanted to start was the ramps and the steps, stoops into the east side of Washington. Those have to be addressed. We're going to start that project over spring break. I've got those quotes and started spring break. Our thinking is if we can get that in place, we can have those ramps to help move stuff out when we go to make our moves. So that's the reason for starting it early. I've got probably 3/4 of the quotes back in now. Got hard numbers on that. I'm still got one big one that I'm out there, and then we've got some in-house stuff that I'm still figuring. But we're moving along. I by the end of this, by the next board meeting, I should be able to give you solid numbers in. Any questions on any?
I think
of
the
it?
numbers are, what it looks like the numbers are quite a bit less than what we had anticipated. I think we had to.
On certain things, there's a
Yeah.
couple that are going to be a little bit higher, but for
But
the
overall, I
overall,
think
we
we'll
should
be under what we
should be
estimated.
less.
That's obviously good news, so.
$74,000 less? Is that what we need?
I don't
Right
quite think
close.
it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be quite that.
I attended the Kansas, Missouri Superintendent's Forum last Thursday and Friday, and again, just outstanding conference. Greg had called today, and I was filling him in on a little bit that all these guys come in, or presenters do this pro bono type things, and there was a gentleman, and just kind of in and out. I have his contact information. Haven't had time to Google him and see some of his literature, but works with Harvard University a lot and kind of a school reformer, and talked about that philosophy and the public education where we are, and just very, very interesting. I was fascinated in his thoughts, and a lot of the things that we talk about, that we use basically a military-style system to manage schools, patient unions, but unions in general, and what's the purpose of those, and talk about NEA changing their mindset to be more of how are we going to improve instruction and some of those things, rather than the true management sides of things, salary, benefit, work day, all of those things. Very, very fascinating, but he works all over. And he just flew into Kansas City on his way somewhere else, came down, visited with us for an hour at the most, got on the plane and flew out again. But very, very interesting gentleman and a lot of good ideas. Talked about not having year-round school, how it just makes no sense that you send kids home to lose over 3 months all what they learned and then come back and those things. But it just interesting. I just wanted to mention that. But, there's just one of many, but it was very good. That's my report.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Then on to financial reports, and Director of Finance and Support, Tracy, do you want to take over?
Sure. We have been getting more and more information every hour, literally, on the block grant bill that was released last Thursday. We had a conference call today at 3:30 with KSDE, and they're still trying to fully understand it. But the main thing we have right now is that whatever funding, audited funding we received this year, with a few changes, few tweaks, they are proposing that we would receive the same amount for the next 2 years. So we'll keep you guys updated as we hear more on it. And, of course, they're pushing it through to pass very quickly. They had a hearing on it this morning, and I think by the end of this week is when they would like to have it approved, at least through the committee hearings. Dean, do you have anything else to add on
Yeah,
that?
just a couple things. I thought, we really didn't know where we were going to come out with how much we would lose and how it was all figured. And I do have a call in that they're going to call, and I'll talk specifically about our budget. I did get in, there was 140-some districts all at once trying to answer questions over the phone or ask questions over the phone. I did get in and ask a little bit about where our budget would be. These numbers that they have on the latest spreadsheet are all unaudited. And the way our understanding, and this was asked more than once, that the state aid is reduced for we don't receive capital outlay state aid, so we don't lose anything there. That's the best thing about not having it, I guess, is we don't lose it. On the local option budget, we were supposed to receive, these are unaudited numbers, $440,000 in the local option budget state aid. With the changes that they made through this bill, if it passes, we would receive $316,000, I'm rounding these off. So lose that much in state aid. But the good part of that is that is part of the block grant, and it goes into general fund, not into capital outlay, or into local option budget. So whatever our legal max, and that's a question I have for them tomorrow, whatever our legal max is with the local option budget, we can still collect. So we would see that $316,000 in our general fund. If we wanted to leave it, you could transfer it and put it in capital or into the local option budget. I think it would behoove us. All these are conversations we'll have, but my first thought is it would behoove us to have that in general fund and go ahead and use every year when we collect taxes on the local option budget. We have delinquency rates and all of those things, and you always collect more than what you can spend. Well, our balance is somewhere around the $600,000 mark, I believe, and you could use that to make up the difference with this. Now, the difference is the relief that we saw last year in the local option budget mill levy goes away because they're not going to fund it the way they did. So that'll come back up some. So a lot of questions as we go into next year, but this year I think we should leave that in there. And again, this hasn't even passed. It's all rhetoric right now, but we're not going to be hurt as bad as what I thought up front. I think what Tracy and I looked at, we would actually see, I think, a little bit of a positive increase in what we actually had planned on a budget than what we have, even after the audit results and all of that.
Okay, so if the grant amount, the block amount, is based on this year's numbers, no matter what happens next year with our enrollment, that stays the same?
Correct.
So if
Whether
we
it
get
goes-
should we get an influx, it doesn't matter, we just have to absorb that.
They
They-
haven't.
Go ahead. No.
They have an extraordinary fund that they are budgeting in also to account for those kinds of things, if there would be a drastic change in property valuations or enrollment. But I believe today they said they had $12 million in that fund.
For next year,
For
right?
next year, so it's not going to be
And I-
nearly enough to cover
Yeah, I think
what
there was
may or
over
may not
$12 million
happen.
of requests over the phone today for
Yeah.
increased enrollment and all of the oil valuation dropping, and so that's not going to be enough to cover everything. But if we saw an increase, that would, or in student enrollment increase, our budget would not go up. what does hurt right now, and I think from what I listened to this morning, or the first one compared to the second, one of our concerns is with the virtual school aid. They're changing all of that. This year we'll receive $212,000 in virtual school aid. The next year it drops to $62,000 based on our numbers. And obviously Mark and I have been talking about that. What do we need to make that work? But this afternoon they talked about that, and I'm not so sure that it's a separate fund. It's not part of the, it's part of the block grant, but not a set fee or a set amount that I think we could the kids that enrolled next year, I think we can classify them as like ours, and then we would see we wouldn't see that big a cut, I should say. We wouldn't see an increase. So there's still a lot of those questions. But even with that next year, very doable compared to what we first anticipated. So that's locked in this year. The next 2 years, then they'll be working on the formula, and who knows after that. But, so some good news, I think, in a way, finally on budget. So some schools lose a lot more if you had capital outlay bond in it, or capital outlay state aid. You basically lose it if your mill levy was already 8, which ours is.
So on the reports I have attached, they really have already changed just since Thursday and Friday. I'll touch on a couple of things. Though we did receive final word that our health insurance will not change beginning July 1st. So that was huge, considering what we've been hearing about other entities and how much theirs has risen. So I did change that. So I did not list a health insurance increase for the 15-16 school year. And we kind of talked about some of the questions last week. I don't know if there's any other questions on it. I did list after the report a breakdown of what each item means and kind of some of the things that might be included in that. Some of them I think were pretty broad, and it may not have been real easy to tell what those items were for. But I pretty much went with the 2% increase for any goods. Just took that off the 5-year inflation rate, average inflation rate, and then I went 3% on any services. Seems like those usually go up a little bit more, so that was my estimate. But of course, if the block grant passes, the thing that is challenging with this type of a report is our expenditures have to meet our revenue. So if we are, as we get more information, I'll continue to adjust this, showing that, because we're going to have to, make those expenditures, either reduce them or however we would need to match that revenue. If we do get the block grant and nothing changes, that will be a little bit easier for us to be able to forecast, but sometimes they change even though they say they're going to give it to us for 2 years, depending on what happens in the state. So are there any questions on the expense report? Like I said, I will continue to adjust it as we get more information. Okay. Then on the PowerPoint I have attached is our enrollment numbers. Our head count from last year to this year did go from 3,010 to 3,055. Our audited FTE based on weightings also went up from 2,821 to 2,852. But then, that was our audited FTE. But then our weighted FTE dropped from 4,514 to 4,330. The main majority of that was because of the declining enrollment that they took out that we received last year and did not receive this year. So
New facility.
Oh, I'm sorry, new facilities. New facilities weighting. With the block grant, if that does pass, the weightings will all be taken away except for a couple of them. So, weighted FTEs and things like that won't be numbers we look at in the future. So on the second slide, I have listed the change from general fund and LOB from last year to this year. And this is all based on what we knew at the time, anticipating a 1.5% decrease in base state aid per pupil that the governor has already put into law. So if the block grant would not go through, these numbers would stay, but if the block grant is passed, then this would all change. So then I just have a slide showing our published, budgeted, and audited FTE. By the way, stop me if anybody has any questions. We published 4,405, but we knew we were not going to spend all of that. That was just in case we would have an increase in enrollment, that we wouldn't have to republish our budget. We actually budgeted for 4,352 weighted FTE, and we were audited at 4,330. We lost some in at-risk and some in transportation were our main two areas that were audited that reduced that number. And so between the budgeted and the audited amounts, the actual dollar amounts, again, this is what we knew at the time, based on the base state aid, we lost $108,000 from our budgeted general fund to the audited amount. And then the next slide, excuse me, shows with the governor's 1.5% reduction, it would reduce our base state aid to $3,810, and that would have been another $180,000. The numbers we're seeing now, though, the block grant wouldn't be nearly that much. So we would definitely, as far as we know, looks like we would be a lot better off with the block grant this year than the governor's cuts. And so then I just showed what we were lost through the audit, the $108,000, the change in base state aid, $180,000, and then also it does affect our LOB, our supplemental general fund, with the audit for a total of both funds of $392,000 that we would need to reduce this year's budget by to meet those numbers.
So when we talk about the difference in what we had versus the audited results, and you said we lost them in transportation and what was the other one?
At risk.
At risk. So again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I know that we want to hedge higher because we can't change it after the fact, but is that all of it, or did we miss something? What was it? Something?
I mean, our enrollment numbers were pretty accurate.
Okay.
What we missed was transportation. We used Google, the addresses. I mean, when we were telling families whether they could or couldn't qualify.
Okay.
And when the auditor drives, if it's a tenth off, it doesn't count. So,
Okay.
you know, and they're rounded off in Google. It was way too many. I'm disappointed in that.
Okay.
Next year, we will take care of that. We've already met, have a system, and we'll be much closer. And then the at-risk, and I don't remember exactly what the at-risk, just verifications, I just, what was turned in and what she audited, some of them didn't qualify for what we had projected. So, yeah. Higher than what it should be, I'll give you that for sure.
Not as off as we were last year, right?
No, not.
Okay. So it's better. Okay.
Not at all. And so I have a list of just some different items where we know that we have savings already this year. Again, if, we'd have a very long cold spell, which I'm hoping we don't, our heating costs could go up, but we've seen some savings there. Our work comp premium, we're just doing really terrific on the few number of claims, and even the claims that we're having are almost all staying under that $2,500 deductible, so it's going really well there. So I'm anticipating about $68,000, unless we would have, a large number of claims all of a sudden here, but, they are definitely always less in the spring anyway, once we get past the ice and slips and falls and things. And like the transportation, salary and benefits, $70,000. We had budgeted that. I don't think, at the time, Russ didn't really know all the changes that were going to take place, and so he didn't have to hire nearly as many people as he thought to cover all the routes. So that was money we had budgeted that we're not going to have to spend. And then also we'd anticipated a slight increase in our medical insurance that may have gone up January 1st for the employee side that we pay part of, and that also stayed the same. So easily we can find $221,000 that we'll be able to reduce our budget by this year in the general fund, and then the work comp and heating again out of the supplemental general. So I believe almost $318,000 we can easily see, which according to these numbers left us about $74,000 short still. I think I was conservative in a lot of those numbers. There were some lines that maybe, I believe we will be $3,000 or $4,000 less than budget, but I didn't list all of those. So I don't see a problem making up for this, and especially if the block grant goes through, we'll be considerably better off in that regard. So I'll keep adjusting this also as we learn more, but I feel pretty comfortable that we'll be able to make this up just through really watching our spending from here forward.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused, because this is all relative to this year's budget.
Correct.
But when you say if the block grant goes through, that affects next year, not,
This year.
Starts this year.
well, it would start immediately?
Yes, if it goes through, the governor did his allotment and cut the Bay State aid per pupil by the $42, I think. That would be reinstated, and they would make the cuts in state aid, mostly in bond and interest, or I don't think bond and interest made a difference. Capital outlay and the local option budget.
Okay.
And other things, there's a few other things. So for us, we are really hoping the block grant goes through and these numbers totally change instead of the deficit that, and I don't know what slide it is, the 392,000, that figure is going to be considerably less. What we need to figure out, and that's the call I have in tomorrow, to see how our local option budget would be affected. So
Thank you.
that could make a huge difference in what we have, so.
So when do they vote on this, the block grant?
They wanted, it's on the fast track. They talked about end of the week. Today, they had the conference call, and actually, Senator Merrick and Representative, and I can't think of what his name was, or even what area from the state, but they were part of this and answered questions and heard concerns, and they were very adamant that this is the direction that we need to go. It was asked about, well, what about revenues? How do we get the budget balanced? And they both said, this is the main priority. We need to know how much we're going to spend before we can balance the budget. If it goes through, then these numbers would be what we can count on the end of this year and the next 2 years. So that piece of it is good news. There's going to be districts that are totally against it because they lose. For once, I feel like we can benefit a little bit. We lost our new facility waiting last year and did some things, so I think it's not a bad plan right now.
Worst case scenario, 74,000 is kind of what we're looking at for this year.
Yes.
Block grant is approved, that may very well help us out, but that's locked in for, and is it 2 years? If the block grant is approved?
This year and then
And
the
the
next
following.
2.
Yeah,
15,
two.
16, 16, 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to our 5-year, we're looking at everything though, worst case scenario only. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll change drastically, but we just need to wait and see now, so.
Any other questions? I did also list an updated capital outlay. I broke it out so that technology is all together and then also buildings and grounds. It was asked a few weeks ago about if Lewis Field, if the track was included in this number, and it is. We also talked to Fort Hays, and they do not anticipate an increase in price in the near future, but said they were willing to definitely discuss a multi-year agreement if we could come to terms with everything. So that's something that we'll look at with them, as we move forward. And then also we had Rusty's 5-year budget along with that he went over last week. And that's all I have, if there's no more questions.
I just had a question on that budget. I know that we had talked about it last week, and I don't want to rehash that, but are we, you've got items from the longest been 90 years to upgrade, some at 78 years, and I guess what I'd like to see is a budget that says over the next 10 years or 15 years, what needs to be done, and what is, without regard for the budget, what is the dollar amount for those necessary repairs? It ties into two things, one of which, how we budget out of capital outlay, but the other of which is the need or the desire to go forward with the bond issue.
So you are wanting kind of a priority list, I mean, just items that we know we're going to have to do in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean,
Yeah.
and just say, it's going to cost us this amount. And
Understand, we may not be able to afford it.
exactly, but we need to know and use that as we have the conversation, which we have to have on how are we going to get to that point? If we can't do it with just bond or with capital outlay, yeah. Yeah, I think we can come up with that fairly easy and.
Well, most of those numbers you could pull from HTK's report, couldn't you?
I think Rusty already
Move 'em around.
did that.
That's where I was going.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Well, and I think that's what your report here is, right?
Yeah, that's what those numbers are based on.
so, yeah, we can put together something like that to know where we are and what we have to have. Because there are things that we're going to have to do. There's no doubt about it.
All right, are there any more questions for Tracy? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, and this will be one motion to approve all items listed below, which would include the work session minutes from March 2nd, 2015, the board meeting minutes from February 16, 2015, the financial reports, which includes the clerk's report, investment report and petty cash report, personnel transactions, approval of bills in the amount of $2,528,478.40, approval of the ERSEA priority grids for early head start.
I do want to draw your attention on the personnel transactions. We do have 5 people that have given us their retirement letters, and just wanted to mention them personally and thank them for their service. The first, Nancy Sprock, who is the nutrition service manager at O'Laughlin. Linda Lang is one of our elementary music teachers. Nancy Flax is a high school art teacher. Jonita Winholtz, kindergarten teacher at Wilson. And Melinda Cross, who is a foreign language teacher at the high school. But those 5, along with the few we had before, so want to thank them for their service, and we will be mentioning them again.
Thank you, Dean. Is,
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
okay, we have a motion by Board Member Schwartz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Waddell. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. On to new business. Item A, the insurance broker presentation. Dean, do you just want to do a follow-up with that from the work session?
Well, at the work session, we had each one of the insurance companies present. We had asked to bring that back tonight and just, I guess, continue the dialogue and see what direction that we needed to go. So I guess you guys just need to open up that dialogue, so.
I would make a motion that we go the direction of utilizing a broker instead of an agent for the next school year, or next 2 school years.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Schwartz. Is there a second before we open up any discussion?
Second.
Okay, second by Board Member Lang, and we will open it up for discussion.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with switching from an agent to a broker with, we don't know what the numbers will be. They may be higher, they may be lower, they may be the same. So I just having a real issue with shopping out of town for a service that may or may not result in any savings.
Dean or Tracy, what was the total paid out last year with commission base?
I think we ran those numbers last
I
week.
think it was 100.
23,800 was the, off of last year's premium.
Was that what you've included here on the
Yeah, that's right.
agenda item? It says
So-
$25,897.
And that's the grand total with everything?
That was 15% of the property casualty, and then I believe they told us last week that workers' compensation commissions typically 5 to 8%, so that would be 11 to 19,000, based on what we paid in fiscal year 15 for workers' comp.
Yeah, I don't think you'd save that with KSB though, would you?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
If we bid KSB's work comp again and they were the low, I don't think well, maybe you would, I don't know, but I just think the way that's set up, I don't know if you have that savings on theirs. If it was somebody else, you would.
I would like to, and, you know, there's still some things here that I don't probably fully have the best language with. It's difficult for me to see moving away from local provider that has done as much for our district in many ways. So in my mind, I would still like to see, well, let me come back for a second. Agent versus broker. I mean, if there's a way that these fees are the same. So the brokerage fees we've seen have been $20,000 presented to us. The commission from an agent side roughly comes into the same, but if there was a way that we could fix those to where they were all the same, let insurance planning have what I would consider, for lack of a better term, home field advantage, and select, which I think would probably be EMC based off of the work comp meeting, and then let everybody else go. Conrady was, you know, with Wright. I can't remember, I don't think it was really pinned down from insurance partners who they would use, just that they had numerous to pull from, and go from there.
The workers' compensation commission, we're under KSB, correct?
Yes.
So we don't pay that, so that's kind of null. Now, is that a one-year agreement with KSB?
Workers' comp would be included in the broker if you went that route.
But the current plan we have with KSB, is that 1 year or is that multi?
1 year.
And our projected savings on our budget are figured by staying with KSB.
Staying at the same rate we are this year, no matter what the company is.
I think a couple of issues for me. We've had 3 different people present on this. You basically got 2 players in the market. There's a couple of others that are out there, but I think if we're going to say, well, we're going to let IPI have the choice of who they want, they're going to take the 2 that are out there that they can have, and so what? I mean, if we're going to do that, we ought to just go back and say we're just going to give it to them because nobody else is going to be able to compete. I mean, you have Wright maybe, but the rest you don't. And you know, my concern is how we got into the position of looking at this in the first place. And you know, it was not that long ago that we found ourselves in a position of finding out we had insurance that we never authorized. After having meetings that we'd asked to get information in advance, that we didn't get in advance, and then got it either 4 or 6 days, I can't remember which, prior to the expiration of our insurance, when everybody knew we didn't have a meeting until a week, or then either 11 or 13 or 14 days after that. So, that's the concern for me. What's more concerning is what went out was a request for a broker and to bid on doing a broker agreement. And, I know when we had talked to, and I know Lonnie wasn't here during those previous discussions, but when we had the other representatives from IPI here, we were told they could do a broker agreement and would be willing to do that, but now it's my understanding they don't want to do that. And I mean, I think if you're gonna switch it all, you got to go send out a new RFP, because what we'd be fashioning here is some new proposal if we did that. But I think we sent it out for a broker, and we had 2 conforming bids and one that said we want to be an agent, and that wasn't what we were asking for. So I think, what you have here is what your quantity is on your cost. And it's a scary proposition because you're going to change, but what happens if we go out and rebid this and our premium is $25,000 as it is now? I mean, essentially we could save $6,000 if we go with the broker route. I'm all for leaving business in town, but at the end of the day, we've got to provide the best education we can to the students of this district. And, how do you do that when you're spending more money that you don't have to for the same service? So that's where I'm at.
Would it make a difference if insurance planning set it at a $20,000 rate? $20,000 premium? If that was the same across
Had they
the
done
board?
that, I mean, no, I wanted to go the broker route regardless. I think if they change their bid now, I think you got a problem, because there was a deadline and that time's come and gone. And so, I mean, if they would have done that, then I think they're in the same boat. It doesn't, to me, it's irrelevant who's bidding on it. I think we need to go the broker route. And if we decide to go that route, then my decision on who I'll pick is based on, well, there's other factors, but I guess that's irrelevant if we don't go that direction.
Is there anything foreseen that property casualty could go up next year? Anybody know? Or would that be? Because it is a flat 15.
I haven't had that conversation with anybody about next year's.
Are you talking about the commission rate?
Yeah, the commission rate.
Or are you talking about our premium?
Well, the premium, because
Because if the-
your commission rate, if it's a flat 15,
If it's
your
based on
rate goes
premium,
up, yeah,
right.
you could be paying 27,000.
That's what
all of
I'm
a sudden next
concerned
year.
with.
Well, and the other factor too is, I think what the 15 is what the current company we're with. I think the estimates by the differing people that bid last time or came and presented last time was that could be 15 to 20%, depending on the company.
I would still like to let out bids and let's pick 2 of them, whoever our broker is that we were going to pick tonight, and insurance planning come back. We have time before the next meeting to get a bid back from both of them. And I would like to know what those bids are before I settle on them, before I change from an insurance planning to something else. I don't know if that is...
I agree, and I'd like to see the other stuff, but I think the way we understood it, though, is if that were the case, though, you're going to have, once one of them picks it, then nobody else is going to be able to bid that insurance. So, I mean, how do you keep it fair among all 3 of them if that's the case? That's my question.
Well, the other problem, yeah, I think part of their service for the 20,000 is to put it all together, package it, bid it, and do all of that. And if they do that, and we get that and say, well, no, thanks, we don't want to use your service, we could take that quote potentially and go back to the company and, maybe the company wouldn't honor it, but I'd be really leery to go out and do all the work and then to figure out if you're going to take it later.
But you also have the fact, though, too, is if one particular one, and whether it was insurance planning or Conradi or assurance, if they went out and got a bid for that
Right.
particular one, then the other two probably are not going to be able to bid that same, or be able to offer the same prices, I would bet.
Well, I don't think it's.
That was the way I understood it last time.
That company would not be in play for the others.
Right. So that's my only question, I guess, is how do you keep it fair across there if that's the case, if you have some of those that do that, if we were to bid it out? And maybe I'm wrong, but.
So the question would lie then in who is Assurance Partners going to use? Because we know who Insurance Planning is going to use, we know who Conradi is going to use. So the question there would be, who is Assurance Partners going to use? Is it one of those two?
I think they indicated they could do them all, was my understanding. They could do EMC, they could do the right, they could, and I don't know the name of the company. They said they had somebody else they were working with, and Travelers, I know, was brought up by, I think, all three of them, but ideally, you want something that can hit all the markets. So if when you send it out, you get the most competitive bids.
I might have a little something.
Do you want to come up to the podium, please?
They're all here.
Okay.
The evolution of the RIGHT program has been sort of ongoing for the last 5 years or so. And to date, there are 2 brokers in the state that have placed business with the RIGHT specialty program in a K through 12 setting. There's our firm, and there's a firm out of Kansas City called CBiz, and there's 29 K through 12 districts now in the KASB RIGHT specialty program. We do 14 of them, and the other agency does 15. So there's only 2 agencies or brokers or whatever we want to call it in the state at this point that have utilized the program. I was able to confirm with RIGHT Specialty today, because their marketing representative was in our office, that we will be the sole agency able to bring a RIGHT proposal to USD 489. So
So you're saying if we don't pick you, we won't have right?
yeah, basically
Why
RIGHT
is
is
that?
going through a vetting process, and they're going to make their product available to those that actually will place the business with them.
Is that something different from last week?
Yeah, and I can introduce an email chain to the minutes if I need to. But that is kind of a recent development.
So you would be able to give us a quote
Yeah,
with RIGHT
absolutely.
and go against another insurance company if we so chose to do that?
Well, yeah, that's sort of our chosen partner in this process as we pursue school district business.
Okay.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, the reality of the competitive landscape in Kansas right now is there's 2 carriers. There's EMC and RIGHT. I mean, if you want to, Travelers, Nationwide, Trident, there's a lot of other carriers that purport to make themselves available in this setting, but I'm pretty active in this segment, and I can tell you it's essentially a 2-horse race.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we hear from the other 2 agencies? Because I'm curious as to where they're at and who they can quote.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. And I think maybe a point of clarification makes some sense, that really don't get hung up on whether we're talking about an agent or a broker. Define really what that means. And I think the evolution of our business has been immense in the last 10 years. It used to be that the process was a request for proposal, where qualifying agents would go into the marketplace and each would secure 3 or 4 different insurance companies to bid the insurance, if you will, and no mention really was made of what broker services or capabilities could be brought to fore that would help the district reduce their costs. And I think with the consolidation of the marketplace, that's really the process that the broker position took place, and that with all due respect, it's our recommendation that USD 459 considers a broker relationship that would be based on broker capabilities. Because if it's if we've been precluded from a market, we're unaware of it. We think we have access to the complete marketplace, but would be more centered on broker capabilities that we could deliver in the way of services. If your existing relationship is not spoken to you about workers' compensation reform that took place in 2011, where there were 9 specific statutes that were revised, that were very pro-industry, pro-business. If your handbook, your safety program, and your claim reporting protocol were modified to take advantage of it, you're missing out on some opportunities. So I really think it's our approach to take the agent and broker discussion and say, typically an agent will charge a commission. Typically a broker works for a flat fee. It's a transparent relationship, you know exactly what you're paying, and a consultation agreement is entered into with specific services identified that will be delivered to the district. I think the broker analogy, if you will, also lends itself to, we don't align ourselves with just 1 or 2 different insurance companies. We think that's short-sighted in terms of an overall process that would bring the district what the market is, and it changes from time to time. We think also the fee arrangement is a good one, simply because we now sit on the same side as the district in terms of we're no longer incentivized when your pricing goes up due to market conditions, due to claims activity. We don't get an automatic raise simply because the price of your insurance program went up. So at the end of the day, we're real proponents of the broker capability, broker qualification approach. You really should consider aligning yourself with a broker that has the capabilities, the internal resources to deliver to the district those things that will not only protect the price of insurance, but will more importantly help you reduce your costs. So that would be a differentiating factor from our perspective. We think we've got complete market access that would help secure competitive pricing for the risk transfer program, but more importantly, we think we've got tremendous internal capabilities, not the capabilities of an insurance carrier, but on board. Bruce Ford, our Director of Risk Control, was here last Monday. Would put him up against anybody in the industry in terms of his workplace safety capabilities. Our business analyst, Leslie Webb, has a lot of different capabilities from a trend analysis standpoint, loss trending, that really ferrets out where your issues are and what are driving your costs. So there are many things that we think we'd bring to the table that would help the district, and we'd do so in a broker relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess my presentation will be pretty short. I mean, you had for Mr. Conradi that he's got Wright, we've got EMC insurance. They are the 2 players in the marketplace. So let's each get a bid put together with our respective carriers, and there you've got your competition. That's
Okay.
Is there any other questions? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, there is a motion on the table made by
I'm
board.
sorry, I'm still confused on what our options are. So without entering into an agreement, you would be willing to get us a quote on our premium from, I'm sorry, what is it? EMC, and you from Wright? Wright Special. You guys would be out of it at that point if we go that route?
yes.
Okay.
And we might add that, and again, if there's something that's occurred in the marketplace referred to earlier, not aware of it, but our approach would be to bring it all to you, because we have access to AMC, the Wright Specialty Program, Travelers, other markets, and really think that's the best process to go through instead.
And you should be coming back to us with the same rate that we should be hearing
That's
from
correct.
them? I mean,
That's correct. I'm sorry?
It should be less because it wouldn't have the We would net the commission out, so that would be less. The other thing that is somewhat subjective is who's the advocate for you in the marketplace, what type of submission and what type of advocacy takes place on your behalf to the marketplace. We've got a value report that we've created that demonstrates all of the different services that we've delivered. So as I alluded to earlier, if it's a matter of a workers' compensation reform, are you much more attractive to an insurance company if all your T's are crossed and I's are dotted and programs are in place? You certainly are. So it's our contention that we would do a premier job in terms of being advocates for you in the marketplace. I just have a couple of issues. One, I mean, the reason the broker, to me, makes sense is, one thing that was brought up at the last meeting or at the work session was the fact that you're dealing with a situation in which, Assurance has a program on safety, and I don't think they made any promises that they could perform that same ability to reduce claims that they've done in other districts. But they had a program, they put it together, they provided it to the district. It was their job to roll it out and do that. I know everybody will come up and say they have that, but with ours, I found out at the last meeting, or at the work session, that our current provider has a plan or a program out there to do that we found out about at the last meeting that's been around for a year that we haven't found out about. And for me, that's difficult. I know that they're not writing our work comp, but we were told that we could still utilize that. That's frustrating, to know how much we've spent a couple $100,000 over the last few years in additional premiums because of that. I think we've made it well known that we want to save money in every way we can. Even last year when it was bid, we asked for multiple different deductibles, and the policy that we didn't agree to was written with none. And the other thing, and that was very frustrating last year as well, was that Board Member Rankin asked the question, what can we do with deductibles on our buildings and our vehicles? I think it was buildings is what it was brought up about. Can we increase the deductibles on those and save some money? The answer was no. But if you really want to save some money, here's what you should do. And that's awfully frustrating to find out after the policy's in place that, oh, by the way, if you wanted to save some money, you could have done this before you wrote the policy and saved a bunch of money, and that does us nothing. So that's my frustration. The concept that we're going to have somebody on our side in the game with us is what I'm looking at. And if it doesn't work out, then we can make the change and go back. But I know the city of Hayes went this route several years ago, and it took them a little while, but they were able to save $100,000 this year on their policy. They did go out of town, but they went to St. Louis. But if it's $100,000, the question is can we go further away and save more? It's at the end of the day, what we pay in premiums for insurance has absolutely no basis on educating a single child in this district.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Because the current motion on the table, and Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, your motion was simply to move towards a broker. Was the first motion, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll go ahead and call for the vote on the motion that Board Member Schwartz had made to first move forward with just the broker. So not at any point in time here are we selecting anybody other than saying we're moving forward with the broker or not. And so call for the vote.
I think, just to clarify, it's a broker arrangement, not a broker. I think you're saying the same thing.
Right, yeah, broker arrangement. Not selecting any particular company at this time. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. And then Dean, you're looking for selecting a company tonight, is that correct?
Well, I think it would be in our best interest if we're going to go with the broker piece, then to select one of those two.
Okay.
I would make a motion to accept the administration recommendation to select Assurance Partners of Salina and enter into an agreement as provided by them through the RFP process.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Schwartz for Assurance Partners of Salina. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Lang. Open up for any discussion?
Dean, you've had some experience with them, is that correct, at some of the other, at another school district, is that correct?
And, yeah, previous school district for, let's say, 1 or 2 years before I left, but, yeah. And satisfied with services, and they saved us money, and, yeah, I don't have a issue at all. I think they would do a good job.
Any other discussion or questions before I call for the vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. All right, on to agenda item B, digital learning plan. I take it, Shanna, you're going to present this?
Talked to drill through it and in great detail at the work session, so I'm just going to go through and please ask if you have any questions. The purpose of our digital learning plan is to explain why we feel technology is important in 21st century classrooms. We've talked a lot all year about justifying the need because we know it's a huge dollar amount. From this level, central admin, to building admin meetings, to building level with teachers, justifying that need. So again, this is has been a collaborative effort all year from our standing tech committee to the subcommittees at every level. So the vision we have is to prepare our students for successful learning in the global digital learning society. We feel like in order to do this, support is needed by committing resources and funding to that implementation. Some of the things we listed, the infrastructure, we feel like we have a very good start on. Personnel, digital resources, and then professional learning is a huge piece of this. We have basically 4 goals. The first goal is to develop instructional practices that transform learning. We feel like we've been at a level of enhancing learning, but we really want to get to that next level of transforming learning in a digital environment. And it's going to take time, but in order to do that, we feel like we need to develop and have some conversations about best practices, what that looks like. We also know that in order to transform learning for our students, it needs to be geared to their diverse needs and really differentiated so that we reach every learner. That's bullet point 2. Also then, rigorous instruction and that relevant content, that relevancy of the content is major when we have mobile devices and hands-on technology with our students. Again, we would deliver instruction through a variety of ways. This is not all having students in front of a device. It's about a balance, blended learning, and again, that's one of our goals. The second goal, and this is just an instructional goal overall, is to achieve student outcomes, those growth outcomes. We feel like technology in a digital environment can really help increase student engagement. We need our students to have ownership and be active in their learning, so we feel like that's a big piece of this. In order to do that, we need to look at student data regularly. We need to make sure that our instruction and then respond to that instruction if it's not working, making sure we have interventions that are aligned to our college and career standards. A big piece of this is a digital citizenship plan, making sure we're working with students on how to use technology to become citizens, better citizens, increase their understanding. Some of those digital citizenship topics would include things like cyberbullying, information literacy, being able to evaluate resources, internet safety, that type of thing. And then, of course, utilize technology to increase that engagement, and overall, the goal is to achieve mastery of learning for our students. Goal 3 then, huge piece again, is that staff development, of making sure we have staff development for instructional staff, all of our teachers, whether they be directly classroom teachers, special ed teachers, ELL title, but how to integrate technology into the overall instructional design. And so we would look at outlining a professional learning plan for student use of devices, and then make sure we commit resources to ongoing professional learning through collaboration. A lot of research talks about collaboration leads to student achievement, so this would be a way to do that. Again, the purpose is to demonstrate that continual annual growth of our teachers. They're not all at the same level, and that's where our students are, so we don't expect them to be at the same endpoint in a year, but we want them to assess where they're at, set a goal for annual growth, and then get feedback on that. And then also in visiting with the IT department, make sure that we help staff understand just the district network configuration, the big picture of how things work. And then number 4, we've talked and we've started to explore options for restructuring IT support. A lot of feedback from teachers has been having someone in the building that can go in and work with teachers more closely. So we'd like to look at some instructional staff that we could provide some interaction with teachers about best practices there at the classroom level. So with those goals would come expectations, which there's a bulleted list there. Again, this was huge in all 3 elementary, middle, and high school subcommittees. They really feel like digital learning, mobile devices, technology will really increase student understanding, promote that creativity, and improve critical thinking. And teachers would plan and design, obviously, environments that would promote that. We also would have that professional development plan be a piece of that. Talked about the expectation, demonstrating, students would demonstrate their understanding of that digital citizenship and literacy, which we talked about. We would expect instructional staff to differentiate, like we talked about as one of the goals, whether that be reading ability, language barrier, etc. And this was another thing I wanted to highlight that came through on the subcommittees is students. We really want students to shift from consumers taking information in to creating and being more active. And that can be demonstrated with more complex thought processes. We could measure that by the number of projects, portfolios that are happening versus now and then. We know that an initiative which we've started to implement is to decrease usage of paper and print materials, and then eventually, hopefully, to eliminate printers in buildings. And then this school tech utilization will be overseen by building administration. So those are the expectations that align with those goals. Evaluation is a huge piece. How will we measure this success? I have a few examples I'll just show you here after I go through them. But one of them, we already have a walkthrough evaluation tool, and it's powerful in that it gives information on things that are happening, whether it be technology integration, our students engage, what level of Bloom's taxonomy is happening most often in the classroom. So we feel like that would be a measure for success. Also requests from staff on what technologies out there. Are they asking for more things? When we have some professional development, get some feedback that would align with goal 3. We would also be able to measure the utilization of online resources. These are a list of the things that exist now, but we know with a new lease or new technology, these may change in time. The next bullet is just generating reports, usage reports, overall capacity, whether that be electronic monitoring from the IT. Print material can also be monitored that way with reports, and then we can identify strengths and weaknesses and adjust accordingly. We can analyze different reports from various student achievement data. A lot of technology is directly in our standards, so we can look at that. Student evidence of learning. Talked a little bit about this with expectations. Kids will be doing and creating more, so we need to measure digital portfolios, projects, multimedia journals, those types of things versus just the more traditional ways of evidence of learning of students. And then my learning plan is what we use to track professional development points. And within that, our educators set an annual goal, and we would ask them to have a goal that's tied to technology and integrating it in their classroom. And then we would also look to go a little bit further and have them give feedback and have some accountability for that professional development. So that's what that sums up. Explore that option, which I know the program does have the capacity to do. So that would align with goal 3 and 4. And then the last measure there would be just teachers intentionally integrating technology and implementation of those student devices to reach the desired outcome. And then we list some other possibilities there. A few examples. This is the Bloom's taxonomy from the walkthrough tool, and this was just pulled today, and it's overall, we could break it down by building. But you could see receiving knowledge 28% of the time when we do those walkthroughs. That's the level of Bloom's taxonomy, which is the lowest level. And then applying is our largest, and then the smallest chunks are those higher level, which we would expect to see an increase, which would be a way to show that we're using technology to reach that higher level and having our students be more creators versus consumers. Another measure, BOE Max is an online program. Right now, it tells the weekly time spent by active students in that first graph, and you can see we're not at a very high level with the technology we have. This is a K-8 program. And then we could also look at the students' average daily time and compare that and use that to measure.
Shanna, on that up there, can you scroll back up?
The
No, go down.
Okay.
Where you had less than 1 hour, is that less than 1 hour as the machine reports it, or as to an evaluator reports it?
It's the machine. It's a web-based, so it would be as the students are logged in.
To that program.
Right, to that program.
Yeah. No.
Just to
Oh,
that.
so they're just in that program?
Right,
Okay.
yes, just in that program. And then, I mean, it talks a little bit more about subjects, how many standards are completed, the assessments that are completed, the number of lessons, so we could look at that. You can see there, it talks about 19 minutes as the average time per day, and then overall per week. Those are just a sample of some of the reports. Another program, next page, is Reflex Math, which is an adaptive online, it just helps with math fluency. And this is used in our elementary schools. And you can see we have shown growth, starting fluency. These are just numbers. They're small to read, but you can see 0 to 49% fluent are red, and that's increased from the beginning of the year till down. And then 50 to 79% is this orange color, 80 to 94 is yellow, and then we have 95 to 100% there. And these were just assessments still in progress. So this is just an example of some of the things that we can be monitoring the progress of when we're talking about that digital learning plan.
And can I jump in real quickly? One of the items that sticks out for me when we talk about some of these goals and expectations is the ability to differentiate, to teach at the various level of our students, especially as our class sizes get larger and larger. And this particular program, I've seen our teachers using this year at the elementary school, and that's exactly what that does, is, each child is able to work at their different levels. So that we have just as a parent, I've been able to see the success of that and know that each of my children are working at their potential level in math, for example.
And that is key, that what adaptive is in the BOE Max and in the Reflex Math. And we actually are able to possibly, for 2 years, sign up to a reading intervention program called Lexia Core 5, which I know when Nancy went down to the National Title Conference in Texas last year, they had great reviews, and I've read different things about it. But there's some grant money available that we can tap into for the next 2 years, and we looked at that with the elementary principals, and that's huge, just that meeting kids at their level, showing that progress, teachers get immediate feedback, and then they can do class instruction. It's not all about being in front of the computer, but it's that adaptive curriculum to meet the needs of every kid, and then the immediate feedback that the teachers are able to get that assessment. And those are the things that will grow, and those will be topics of professional development, because it's going to take some time to learn how to use that data. But those are the things that, will be very exciting. And thank you for sharing that. Because Reflex Math has been very popular, and BOE Max is is gaining ground too, again, even with the technology we have now. So the potential for it is great. Some opportunities we just listed there, closing the achievement gap, obviously providing some technology to all. From feedback this year, when teachers have been able to go out and do visits at the schools and have the iPad pilot, there's a lot of excitement, so we're hoping to just kind of revitalize and have teachers get excited about this plan, inspire that student learning and creativity, and then some parental involvement with that whole digital learning environment. I included there the Hayes High Tech Subcommittee, just gave a pretty good definition of digital learning and what that would mean. I know one of the presenters, Dean, heard over the weekend, I think Deb Oliver is her name, wrote a book about transform learning, and what I really liked and what I really feel we've done in this plan, and I say we because it has been a collaborative effort, is we really are putting learning first versus device first. This isn't about platform or device. This is about what we expect and need, the vision we have for our kids to help prepare them, and so this is where we feel we need to start. Any questions or
So this is what you're wanting to implement, irregardless of the device type, right?
No price tag in this plan. So without
Okay.
the potential we see that we could provide for our students, that will be coming up. I think how we get there and the specifics will follow this, but we felt like starting with the big picture of why and putting learning first is where most programs have done that and seen success. I mean, we've all read different things, we've shared articles, and that's what they say. If you're going to implement technology, we know there's a high dollar price tag on it. If you're going to be successful, this is the place to start. And then continuing to monitor progress and hold each other accountable.
Versus the technology committee coming in here and saying, we want X amount for the budget, and this is what we want to do. That's driving straight down to the detail. What I like about this is our vision, these are our goals, these are our expectations, and you're asking for a commit to move forward with the details to follow, the financial piece to follow, but we're saying we're committing to this particular, we believe this is important, and we're going to make an effort to pursue this.
I think that's important, and everything I heard last week in Kansas City as well, and she had mentioned Dr. Deb Oliver writing and talking about the implementation. It had nothing to do with what device. It could be anything, whether it's bring your own, anything at all, but this was the first step, or one of the first steps. I think we've already done the infrastructure piece, and I think we're doing a good job of leading into the next step, but this is key on what is our vision, and then we need to determine how and when we're going to get there.
And that may be something that maybe you're talking about as the second part. I mean, I think it's a great starting plan, and I think and I hope it's something obviously that we continue to enhance and tweak going forward as far as doing that. And I guess a couple of the questions I had, for lack of a better term, when that may be the second part of your plan is, when do we start putting the pen to the paper and actually implementing some of the stuff, such as, like analyzing the student data regularly, how regular are we doing that type of stuff, or the committing the resources and funding and time for teacher education, how much funding are we doing, how much time are we going to do for that, knowledge of the district network, how is that going to be implemented to where teachers and everybody starts getting an understanding of that, or even down to students, students demonstrating their understanding of the digital citizenship and literacy and things like that. I would assume the second part of this will have is there testing that's going to be available that we would be able to, and that's where I said maybe some of this may be answered in a second part of the plan, or.
Well, and some of those examples, Common Sense Media will look at different digital citizenship curriculums, but then you should be able to report those. Those are the things that, yes, will follow with the timeline. We'll continue to update you and give you that information as it develops.
All right, before we get into too much more discussion, does someone want to make a motion?
I would make a motion to accept the digital learning plan as presented.
Motion by Board Member Waddell,
Second.
second by Board Member Rankin. Open it up for More discussion, if there's any.
I guess I've got a question. This is step one of the plan, and I guess my first question is, what is the need to vote on this portion of the plan versus just saying, yes, we want to move forward? And then I guess as part of that, Dean, the other part would be is what does a yes vote mean today? And where does that lead us with the next steps?
Well, I think what it does is gives us the, I guess, commitment from the board that, yes, this is the direction we want to go. Yeah, you could say, yeah, this is the direction we want to go. But I just think it gives us that direction of how, and then we can start planning how we want to get there, and we'll have to get into finances, all of that. But I just think it's just like any other goal where we approved those things. That's my take.
And my concern is, you know, we talked about it at length, and I don't want to go into as much length as we did last time, but, you know, and I know Shannon addressed some of the ability to measure some things in there, but for me, and one of the things is I think technology is important, but, you know, one of the things I've found is that, just using Fort Hays as an example, they've got a technology class out there that it's my understanding it's not offered in any other region school in the state. And the only reason it's out there is because the number of kids that come out of our district that have difficulty with the base level technology. So I think this program could be good for that, but if we don't have well-defined goals, I mean, it's concerning to me that we've been doing this for 10 years and that's the case. But that's in the past. But if we do this the same way we did before, we're going to end up in the same boat. And so, to me, if we're going to go make a huge investment in technology, I think we need to be able to identify what it is we want. You know, like that class they're taking at Fort Hays, at the end of the class, they're going to get graded, and it's going to be based on mastery of whatever subjects there are. And, you know, whether that's knowing how to use Microsoft Office, whether it's knowing how to, you know, turn on a machine. I don't know what all the details would be. But I think those are some things computer specific that we ought to have or have identified. And then as to the areas where they're just, the technology is a support tool for other areas of learning, whether it be reading or math or whatever the case may be, how is it, do we define what those are going to do and then measure whether they've had any effect from, you know, for instance, where we're at today versus a year from now or 2 years from now, and I'm sure there's a way to do that. I haven't found one, but I mean, it's one would be to measure where kids were at today versus where they're at going forward. One would be to measure our test scores, but you know, that's more difficult to do on a one-year basis. So. That's my concerns, and I guess I don't want to, if the answer is well, if you vote yes to this, you don't get to go back and have the argument about whether we have abilities to test, and because
No, I think that it's a work in progress. I mean, it really is. We're going to have to address as we go through any step, and hopefully this conversation will happen every year to where, you know, 10 years from now, the board isn't saying, well, gosh, there wasn't anything to find, and we did the same thing. Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think...
and I guess that was part of that was my question as well, and I think, in Shannon, if I understand that correctly, you're basically saying this is kind of the first portion to get things started. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, if you will, as far as setting, you know, time frames and things like that, and how all of this stuff is going to take place or work, if I understand correctly.
Is there any more questions? Comments? I think before we vote, I'd just like to say thanks for the amount of work you put into this. This is, I think, the first thing we've ever seen from a digital platform right now. And so it's a great first step forward, but I'm sure you'll come up with all kind of measuring tools later.
It was a collaborative effort. I just got to present it, which was for me, I guess. But hopefully I did it justice, but it was. And that's a huge thing with professional development is taking everything from what the teachers need. It's not what I think. I mean, obviously, we have goals, but we need their input as well. And so it will be an ongoing dialogue. It is exciting and thank you.
Okay. Go ahead and call for the vote to accept the digital learning plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0.
I was just going to say, the insurance people can leave if they want to, if they don't want to listen.
Unless you want to talk about enrollment fees, because that's up next. If anybody's got anything. All right, so we'll move on to item C, which is enrollment fees. And Dean, I'll let you
Thank you
lead
for
us
your
into
time,
that.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We had talked about enrollment fees, and the kindergarten fees that we had set before weren't a one-year thing. We charge $150 for full pay, $75 for reduced meals, and $0 for free meals. That was going to continue as always. The other fees, the activity fees that we added $50 to, it moved the high school from $16 to $66, middle school from $12 to $62, and then the workbook material fees from $100 to $160. I think we need to leave those as is right now. Again, we're still working and looking at the entire budget with block grants. Again, I don't want to sound too optimistic, but hopefully by the time we get all of this said and done, maybe we can revisit this and look at it. But I think for us, not knowing what direction for sure legislators are going to go, I would like to set this and let people start to plan, and we can always lower it rather than go back in and say, oh, by the way, now we have to increase it back to what it was. So.
I'll make a motion to approve the enrollment fees.
I'll second that motion.
And now that we're having some discussion on that, Dean, what was the feedback at the kindergarten roundup with the kindergarten fees? Did you
I
talk
don't
with very
think I
many
had.
parents, or?
I didn't have anybody comment on the fees.
Okay, I figured when you had 268
Yeah, no,
sets of parents
I
there,
was
somebody
surprised,
would
I
have said
thought,
something.
but no, I didn't have anything on the fees whatsoever.
Okay.
Did principals, do you guys have anything? I don't think any of us did, so.
Dean, following up on that question with the kindergarten fee, if for some reason it would move to block grants, how does that work with our policy on kindergarten fees? Because the way we have
We would
written
receive
it-
the same amount of money,
That's not,
I don't think that
like
would have anything
what
to
we
do
get
with it.
funded for now, that theoretically, they wouldn't count FTE, we get paid for half of that, that would continue this year, the next 2 years, because,
They're giving you a block grant.
Yeah.
so you could use it however you wanted. You could use it however you wanted. The flexibility is there with capital outlay, with all kinds of things. I mean, they opened it up to about anything, with the expectation that districts would spend their reserves down, so.
but are you asking, because I believe our discussion and the way we voted on it
yes.
was that we were putting these fees in place and they would continue until the state funded full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Right.
So-
that
It
one.
didn't have a sunset.
They are not
Right.
funding full-day
Okay.
kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah, I got you, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And
Unless they put in that required that we have full-day kindergarten.
Exactly.
You could argue they are.
Then they,
because
yeah.
They're giving us the money. They're just not earmarking it.
yeah, so that'd be something we'd probably have to revisit, I would assume. And I guess that's where I'm at. While I understand, and I mean, I definitely understand we need the money in that. I guess personally, I'd like to see, what happens with the block grant, have more of those discussions, which I think we're planning on anyway, but have more of the discussions on the classes at Hayes High or different things like that, what we can look at, I went back to sports, certain aspects, if there's things we can look at there before, And the reason I say that is I know it's easy to implement these fees now, but I know once they're implemented, it's going to be real hard to go back in and say, well, okay, we take them, let's go ahead and take them off now. So I guess that's my concern as far as moving forward on that.
Well, and I think, at least on the increase, not the kindergarten fee, because I think when that passed, we just said that was a fee and there was no sunset on it.
Right.
But the other, we specifically set a sunset of this year to revisit, and, we talked about it several meetings ago, to take a look at the course schedules at the buildings to see, basically a ranking of 1 to whatever is how we started it. I know Dean and I had talked, and I think doing it in that fashion is probably not reasonable in the sense that how do you pick between math and English? Sure. But it probably is feasible to block those into maybe 3 different categories, those that we must have, those that we really need to have, and those that are then the optional ones. And then to look at it, what funding do we get for those that are optional that we would lose, and what are the potential savings, and what effect, if any, does that have on graduation rates and the ability for kids to do that? I know we've set a higher standard than the state requires, but can we afford that? And so I think that's an issue. I know that the list we got the other day was just on more department-wise, and the one that stuck out was a guide to person study, which is the nice way to say study hall. And the cost of that's about $150,000 a year. And I guess, Dean, you'd probably tell me that we need to negotiate that to get that taken care of, but I think if that's what we need to do, that needs to be addressed. I know that students and parents like it because the kids don't have any homework, or often don't have any homework, but at $150,000.
But I don't know if we could, when you say that 150, we have teachers and paras that do that along with others. I don't think we could say we're going to do away with GPS and say we're going to save 150,000, because we wouldn't be able to get rid of all of those teachers. They do other things, and maybe one GPS and those things. So that, I don't want to get stuck on the 150,000 figure, but yeah.
Well, whatever that number is that we're paying additional for that, I know that unfortunately most of any savings we're going to have are going to be staff related. But when you're broke, I just don't know what you do. Sports, I've heard the comment made that we've got a 6A athletic schedule where the number of sports we have, the number of opportunities we have, comparable to a 6A high school. And granted, we just have recently become a 4A school, but based on the enrollment projections that we saw, in the next 4 to 5 years, Hayes High is going to be about 690 students. And so we're not heading in the upward trend. We're still continuing on the down. I think it then picks back up after that. But so I think we'll probably much more likely be a 4A school than a 5A over the next several years. But obviously that's based on others than us. But I think we've got to look at those issues. And then I've been beating the pay to participate thing forever, but I think that's something to look at as well. And so for those reasons, because we haven't looked at those other things, I don't want people to get in their minds that, well, these fees are going away, because for those people that do budget for it, I think you should. But until we've looked at those other options, I just don't know how you just say, well, we've done everything we can, when I don't know that we have. So, and I'm not being critical of the administration. I just formulating criticism of us as a board.
And I guess I would ask, looking at the leading districts in the state, they're not taking it in the shorts on kindergarten. I can see the direct value associated with GPS. I'm not saying we don't look at the program. I'm saying I see the direct value with it. You know, we just talked about $4,000 to $5,000 on insurance, and this is, what, 200, what is our total cost? 200 and some thousand for kindergarten?
The cost for the other half day is $373.
373. I don't understand why that's not it's been a long time, and I've still got one in elementary school, but I was paying between upwards of $300 to almost $400 a month for preschool / daycare, which is nothing even comparable to what a kindergarten student goes through for a full day. The services that are rendered there are far superior to daycare, preschool. Why is that not? Why are we so willing to lose so much money there, but directly look at some other areas that do have value?
Well, I think that's one of the most valuable things we have is the all-day kindergarten.
I understand that, but at a $373,000 loss. $150, I've never seen how that's a lot of money for somebody to pay for 9 months of education.
No, I'm not debating that, but it's one of the most important things, and a lot of districts don't charge anything. Some do, some charge more, some charge less.
Yeah, we've seen $1,800 to $2,700, you know, a year. I'm not saying we need to get to that point.
But that's on top of a $160 workbook fee.
Well,
You know, so really our kindergarten parents
I
are
know
paying
where-
$300.
But I understand where he's coming from. I mean, if you look at it, the average rate around here is $125 a week for daycare. So you're looking at $541 a month. And, you know, most parents, when they go from paying the daycare to school, they're celebrating because their costs are going to go down. And I get that, but I mean, I think Dean is right. In the discussion we've had, every year this has been on, it's been, I think one thing, even in the times of the boards didn't get along very well and everything was contested, that was one thing we always voted the same on, is that the importance of all-day kindergarten is way up there. And, you know, if you go look at the studies, you know, the quicker and earlier, or the earlier you get to a child and start educating them, the more success you have. And so that's my thought on it. You know, but I think that's one of those factors you look at along with all the rest is, you know, where are you at fee-wise? And, you know, I think the goal is to get to zero since we're supposed to have a free public education.
If I remember right, though, I think, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, when we discussed about that, I think we had even looked at substantially higher than that. We just compromised on the 150 as kind of the other, because I think we even talked, you know, in the $350 to $400 range, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. I guess I trust administration that if you feel that we need to vote on this, I kind of had forgotten that we didn't and that we put this off. It came back quicker than I thought. But if you feel that we need to vote on this now so that those who do budget this far in advance can, I can comfortably vote that way. However, I too would very much want to have this discussion again around May when we have a better view of our budget and are headed into that budget with a firm commit that we will be crunching numbers seriously in an effort to reduce these.
Yeah, there isn't, none of us want to have high fees. I mean, when I first came, I was shocked, and then we raised them, and I think I actually recommended we don't raise them. But now that we have it, our budget's contingent on that. Until we get that, I feel more comfortable knowing that this could be there depending on what the legislators do. But no, our fees are too high.
Outrageous.
I mean, they really are. I'm not going to dispute that whatsoever.
Well, before we go any further, just clarification on that. The current motion is strictly for the $160 workbook.
Not the kindergarten.
Not the kindergarten.
Correct.
So this has nothing to do with the kindergarten. So if that's something we need to discuss, we can definitely add that to another agenda or so. But current motion is just to approve the administrative recommendation for the $160 workbook material fee, the $66 fee at Hayes High, and the $62 fee at Hayes Middle School.
Can I ask, are we able to successfully trace how much of these particular funds have been used at this point?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we anticipate we'll have around 50,000 left in this fund. If the block grant doesn't go through and we have the 1.5% reduction in base state aid, we will need that 50,000 in general fund to get down to the 74 that we're short.
Okay.
If the block grant goes through and we're able to retain those funds, that would be used for a textbook initiative or something that, which is what the fund is intended for.
and that's the plan is to carry over that part of it to be able to purchase textbooks or materials or whatever it may be.
I would just like to give parents a heads up to say this is up to what you can pay, and if we give them a surprise when they enroll their children that it's half price, that would be a happy day for most parents enrolling. I don't think anybody would be mad.
Or if we could even knock off $20.
But that's something we don't know.
Something.
Yeah, that's just something we don't know until Topeka decides what they're going to do.
And I really think it'll be sooner than later, coming from Topeka,
But even then, I mean, when you look at the projections and you look at everything, reality says that we're kind of stuck right here. That there really is no reduction in the future. It's nice to think about, but unless we're willing to make some sort of major district change, or this is going to be the exact same game every year.
Well, I think some of the things that we've done, I mean, like the transportation savings, and Tracy's putting that together, and we're starting to gather that, the number of retirees, just based on a average salary, I mean, not the very lowest beginning salary for somebody to come in to replace a retiree, that's starting to add up, and there's things, and that's considering health insurance for, you know, like meeting what our requirement is now for those that retire, and somebody that came in new. And, you know, we're not looking too bad. A lot better than last year. I feel much, much better.
Yeah.
So
The numbers, the numbers are quite a bit different than last year.
But no, I think we will be getting that, and, you know, talking about cuts and all of those things, that information, we're gathering all of that right now.
Yeah, but we are talking about trade-offs. So whether it's an upfront fee or it's something that has value in the end. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we change this and charge a pay-to-play fee or whatever that fee is, I mean, it's still a fee for somebody. I mean, it just, so.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead and call for the vote for option one, which would be the $160 workbook fee, $66 fee at Hayes High, and the $62 fee at Hayes Middle School. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. On to item D, certified administrative contracts. Dean, do you want to lead us through those?
These are the principal contracts. Nancy obviously is retiring, and these are the rest that in March we take action on, and I'll recommend that they come back.
I'll make a motion to accept the certified administrator contracts.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Patterson, second by Board Member Rankin. Go ahead and open it up for discussion if there's any.
Dean, we had talked last week about modifying the board policy to have something essentially that said that this would not be brought before the board. This would essentially be as the board has one employee, which is the superintendent's in charge of those employees, that the superintendent would handle this issue. We could set a date, March 31st or something like that, that if they had not been notified, that becomes a renewal, but that those issues would all be handled between the superintendent and the administrators, except for if there was a recommendation not to renew. And the additional point that I brought up was if somebody's on an improvement plan or something like that, or an administrator is, that that wouldn't have, the March date wouldn't apply to them, but they would be subject to the state statute renewal date of whatever, the third Friday in May or whatever that is. So, and I guess my question to you would be is, have you had a chance to look at that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think Bill and I need to draft language that would say that and bring it down. It would be a board policy change. So present that to the board and see if that would meet your guidelines, I guess. I'm not adverse to the idea that as long as the principals know that if they would be notified by this day if they're not coming back, I'm not opposed to that. I haven't sat down and talked to them individually or all together about specific notions and then the improvement plan, but I think if we draft that, I can, I don't have an issue doing that. But,
yeah, and I guess I thought, I actually, I was with him, I guess I thought that was what we were going to have.
Well, it's a board policy change.
Are you, Greg, are you anticipating that the board not approve the contracts and not authorize the president to sign the individual contracts?
We would just approve those at the same time we approve all, like the teachers' contracts and everything else. I mean, they would renew, but the contract and all that would just take place at budget time.
Okay.
But that's my thought. I get one question I do have for you, Dean, is do you feel like right now that, I mean, we haven't voted yet on any of the administrator contracts, but do you feel that all of them know right now where they stand based on your evaluations?
Yeah.
And they know what your recommendation, or knew before tonight what it was going to be?
So in the policy you want to create, Greg, you're basically, the only time we would act on it would be in March if they were on an improvement plan?
No.
Or we weren't going to renew?
Only if the recommendation was to not renew somebody, so you'd have to act before whatever that deadline was, so you didn't miss it. But otherwise, none of that would be discussed publicly at a meeting and wouldn't subject them to the scrutiny of it either. My thought is it would be less stressful and less things that they need to worry about from what's happening at this meeting.
I would agree.
Why don't you get the principal's feedback on that, and let's see how they feel about it before we draft the board policy to change it.
Bill and I will draft something, and then
Maybe I misunderstood. Didn't you say you've already talked to the principals or mentioned some of this about them, or did I misunderstand
not specifically
that? Not specifically that? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like their feedback before I made any sort of judgment on that and change the board policy.
Bill, what would we have to do tonight then? If we were to table this, how does board policy read for tonight?
Well, the board policy reads that you need to approve the administrative contracts in March. Is there a date on it? Is it March?
I don't think there's a date, Bill. I think it's just in March. And I may be wrong. We need to look it up.
Yeah, it might be the first board meeting in March. Let me see if I can find something on that. I'm not sure how it reads.
think while she's looking that up, I think a lot of this kind of ties into the same issue we're going to be dealing with. We'll review a number of those board policies, the two specifically that Dean had set out that are contradictory to one another.
It is the first regular board meeting.
Is that what it says, the first regular, so.
Thank you.
So we would have to act tonight, Bill?
So in order to comply with the policy as it currently stands, you'd have to approve those tonight.
Any other discussion?
I agree with, it sounds to me like Dean basically has talked with at least the principals, they know where they stand, and I firmly support as far as moving forward on that. I would just like to see us look at the other direction, and it also gives us an opportunity with the budget stuff going forward. And we've talked about this, we also talked about this last year, changing some stuff it didn't, so I'd like to see that put on the agenda as far as moving going forward, so we get this done.
Put it on number 11?
Yeah, and I mean,
Okay.
it's, because of, like I said, I would like to see that, because I mean, I voted against the other contract for that reason, and I'll probably do the same thing for this one, not because I don't think they're doing a good job, and I fully anticipate all of them being here, but because of the changes I want to see enacted on that.
Okay. All right, well,
Just real quick, I made we had this issue come up at the February meeting for for the budgetary reasons. And, I know we've made some progress on that, but I would like to approve all the budget expenditures at one time versus piecemeal throughout the year. I know we've got different leadership now, but one of the things we did a lot in the past was it would be a race to approve this, and you'd earmark that and spend it, and then you'd come down the road and you'd be looking at other things that you couldn't do, and the reason you couldn't do them is because you've already spent the money up front. And so, to me, I think the best way to evaluate a budget, the best way to evaluate what we should be spending money on and shouldn't, is to be able to look at all of those items and weigh them out and make a decision versus just being presented with what's brought first and having the race to have an item before the board. So, and I agree. I think all the administrators are doing a good job. I think we're not going to operate without them, but
okay. Well, we do have a motion on the table. We also do have a policy that states first regular meeting in March, so action is required. So I will go ahead with no further discussion to call for the vote, made by Board Member Patterson, seconded by Board Member Rankin. All those in favor of renewing of certified administrator contracts for 2015-16, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. On to discussion by board members and agenda request. Board Member Bickle, I will give you the floor first.
I'd like to just, basically what I just discussed, I'd like to see that put on the,
We'll
more
put
than
that on.
likely, more than likely the
We have
next,
to go
either
through
the
all
next
these
agenda
other-
or the agenda following, so we can get that implemented and not wait until next year again and go through the same
Well,
thing again.
I mean, we voted on it last year at this time to leave it the same. So, I mean, it's not like we ignored it. And,
No, I understand
okay.
that, but that's why I
Okay.
said.
Well, I didn't want you to think that
No,
we just
I'm not saying that.
put
I'm
it
just
off
saying,
and.
we went,
Yeah.
we had the same discussion, and I'd just like to do something about it as
We
far as
will-
to go through.
Draft that, and as we go through all the other policies, that'll be part of it, so, yeah.
Dean?
Yep.
Something to add to your plate here. Greg made a very good comment here, and I think Josh kind of followed it up. When we look at programs that have real costs associated with them, and Greg had made the comment, and I'd never thought about it before, but with us being a 4A school, and we're probably going to be in that realm for a number of years.
We're looking at it.
Still?
We'll have that.
Yeah, the 6A versus 4A.
Well, yeah,
I mean, just program costs and what other 4As are doing.
yeah, we have that, and we're looking at the big picture of the district and all of those things, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other discussion or agenda requests?
Well, relative to this policy change we're talking about on the contract renewals, if one of the concerns is that we are voting periodically on piece parts of the budget, when we look at this new one that you've created that's, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, could we not, I know we want to add more lines, but could we not break out the salaries by administrators? And so anything that we are asked to vote on specifically would have its own specific line item, and we're therefore planning for it, and we know what those figures look like?
Yeah, I mean, we can put
And-
certified directors and administrators in there.
And in my mind, to make this useful, capturing a 2% annual increase, if we're talking about inflation or potential raises or whatever it is valuable. But I would also think if we're trying to plan ahead, just headcount wise, if we see our enrollment figures growing, we believe we're going to need to add a section in kindergarten. Are we also looking for an associated headcount, a new salary with that, and are we plugging those numbers in?
We can, but again, we have to, our expenditures need
Have
to
to
fit our
match our
budget.
revenue.
And if we
That's
don't
true.
have the budget to do it, you know, but we can,
But, okay,
but we can do that. I mean, say we're going to plan on adding 3 staff
Right.
2 years from now or whatever.
or we feel we
and
need to
increase-
do that here, which means we have this amount that we need to make up for elsewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we'll know what our budget, I mean, well, my assumption is for the next 3 years, or next 2 years, we should know soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
When do we need to have the digital learning plan finances?
Yes.
We will do an update at the next work session on technology stuff again, and start looking at those types of things and start having those conversations. So the next, what's the date? 23rd or something, is that? 23rd?
So it's
What
gonna
do we
be,
anticipate that's?
that's already on the,
It will be on that agenda, yeah, for tech update.
so I figure we kind of, to move forward, kind of
We-
know
yeah.
what we're going to work with.
Yeah.
So I just wanted, okay.
Yep.
You're way
Yep,
ahead of
that's
me.
the, no, I wouldn't say that, never had.
8 steps.
Dean, I just want to say too, as far as going through and talking about some of this, I want to make sure, just bring it across, make sure I'm not criticizing the administration or any of the jobs you're doing.
I'm not
just
taking it
merely
that,
asking-
I'm not taking it that way.
Well, I just want to,
whatever.
I'm just trying to bring up a
No,
lot of the questions so we
No,
can continue to discuss these and move
Yep,
forward. So
I agree.
I think you guys are doing a good job, so.
No, I didn't take it that way. Other agenda items?
No other agenda items? All right, we will need to go into executive session, so I would make a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of negotiations to include the superintendent, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, director of finance, board attorney, all members of the Board of Education, to begin at 8:35 for a period of 30 minutes.
I think
ending at-
20.
20?
Yeah, I think that'll be enough for negotiations.
Okay, so for 20 minutes to begin at 8:35, ending at 8:55. Is there a second? Second by Board Member Patterson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Carries 7-0.